Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Victory Never Sleeps. We are joined this week by our law speaker, the erudite Alan Turnage, here to share his wisdom with us.
But not my eye cream.
There you go. Always a solid choice. And I see that leading off the show, as usual, G.W. Farnsworth donated $30 towards fixing the heat at Thorshoff and $20 to this program. Thank you very much. You continue to amaze each and every week on here. Thank you. Top of the show stuff. So we have one more episode that will be coming to you from Reno, Nevada. And then the Flavels are moving to Jackson County, Tennessee. So we are very excited about that. I got one more show here with the familiar backdrop, and then we'll be changing it up a little bit and coming to you from the volunteer state. Top of the show things. So we have a couple of different things we are raising money for at the moment. Appreciate you guys' generosity. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for everything you've done up to this point. Some of you may or may not have known, we had a zero-turn lawnmower out at Sigerheim to mow that massive field out there. And it is probably 15 acres of field or so out front. And Nick would go and do that, just about weekly in the growing season. We were doing really good. But some folks in the area decided that they wanted our mower, and because we were not garrisoned out there, our wheel locks and other efforts that we took to secure it were not good enough, and it was stolen from us. So grass grew up a little bit at the end of last year. We've been trying to price out good options, and so that we can get all ready and prepared for growing season this year, and so that we can be good stewards of the land, especially when I get out there. We are raising money to get a new zero-turn and trailer to take it to and from, so it'll be secured and we can avoid the pitfalls of last time. But we're working on that. Anything you guys want to contribute is, as always, much appreciated. Also, it's really cold in a lot of different parts of the country that are not usually cold. Just so happens that the heat in the fellowship hall at Thorshoff went out. Exploring good economic options to fix that at the moment, trying to get the most effect, but does look like it's going to be a pricey fix. So we're trying to raise money for that as well. You guys have, many of you have already donated to these things, and we appreciate that if you have. If you can and you're feeling so inclined, we always appreciate your generosity, and I thank you for that. And then last thing, give you a top of the show update on the pay down of our debt on Frazehoff. Again, having dedicated it in December, it's last month, we are already at 34.7% paid off of that, which is outstanding. Got about $81,578 left to pay on that, but we've made tremendous progress in a short amount of time because you guys are awesome and generous. We thank you. This breaks down to about $111 per member would get it paid off instantly. So that's about where it's sitting this week. But again, you guys are a most generous audience, and we appreciate you. And during the time of doing this, Steve bought us 2 coffees. I believe that's a $10 donation. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate it. I think that's the top of the... if you can make it, we are celebrating DISA-thing next month, February the 20th through the 22nd. That is going to, first, that goes on at all of our Hoffs, but that is going to be the premier event at Njordshof in White Springs, Florida. So if you can make it there, we would love to see you. I will be in attendance. I'm looking forward to seeing folks that I haven't seen in a while and making new acquaintances. So if you're able to be there, we would love to have you. If you're interested, talk to your local folk builder or any member of AFA leadership, and we can get you all set up. With that, Lawspeaker, what do you have for us this week?
Well, I'll start with a couple of top of the show things while we're in that realm. First of all, as I'd like to say at the top of my show, we are always. I would think of this as a cumulative event. So if you have questions about anything else that we've talked about in the past, debt relief, meditation, being manly in a feminist world, all those sorts of things that, the shows are cumulative. I do have a few minutes prepared about the Ruts rituals and habits. But anything else, we is fair game. And if I didn't explain something to your satisfaction in the past, feel free to just ask about that. You can also, if you have a topic that you would like to see us discuss on this segment of the show, it is a monthly segment, Adulting with Alan. You can email us at please talk about something interesting for a change at runestone.org. And we will review that topic for its propriety and preparation potential. Thirdly, on the last show, toward the end of the show, we talked some about investment stuff, and that's what that's what I meant. We talked some about investment stuff. Somebody asked me about silver, whether we should still be buying silver when it was $80 an ounce. Silver closed today at about 105. So if you had bought silver, like I suggested, at $80 an ounce, you'd be up $24 an ounce as of 5 o'clock this evening. Past performance is not a guarantee of future performance, but that is the trend that I see, and based on the stuff that I have been following for quite a while now. So that's the warm up. Here's the pitch. There's a fine line, certainly, between habits and rituals and ruts. My underlying thing for a lot of the topics that I try to address here, as well as my everyday life, and one of the reasons I think that I ended up practicing Asatru, being an Asatruer, finding my way to the way, is about mindfulness. And I think that is a topic that, or rather a way of approaching these things that affects the way that I look at just about everything that I do. And I think a habit is kind of a good way of hitting a groove so that you can so that you can remember to do the sorts of things that you need to do. I, for example, have the habit of meditating each morning as soon as I get up, and usually, hopefully, before I've had my first cup of coffee. That's a good habit. Making your bed, that's a good habit. But once you get past the point of where you're doing things too much on autopilot, where you're again, there's some of the things I used to do, and it's hard to see when you're in it. Eating lunch every day. I've been doing without lunch, breakfast most days, for several months now, and so I think eating lunch was just a habit that I had. I wasn't really hungry. I don't think Americans are ever really hungry very often, but so I just had the habit. I would, it was lunchtime, so I'd go eat lunch. I'd, go pick something up, usually at fast food or quick, or a quick place like Applebee's or whatever. But again, I wasn't hungry. It was just lunchtime. That was a habit I was in. The same thing with it relates back to some of the financial stuff that we've talked about. People are in the habit of going through Starbucks and getting a cup of coffee every morning. It's just a habit. And after you've done it for several weeks on end, it comes in, in a way that is genuinely mindless. So that all you do is, you groove in there and groove out, and you've spent $10, and it doesn't really register. And maybe you're in a tax bracket that doesn't affect your monthly outlay, but for 20 cents, you can make that same cup of coffee at home and be up several $1,000s by the end of the year. A lot of and this came up, driving, right, is one of my pet peeves. And Matt has ridden with me. So I pay a lot of attention to what I'm doing, and I expect other drivers to be doing that, but apparently they don't have that same expectation of themselves or of each other. It and I was in a philosophy class, an adult philosophy class, many, many years ago, back in the late 90s. And one of the guys mentioned that, that for him, driving was just a place where he zoned out, right? So he's not paying any attention to his driving, so that's just a rut that he's in. He probably has driven the same way back and forth to work every day for the last 15 years. And so he just, he's not paying any attention. And that's that's not a good rut to be in, both because, sorry, both because, but because the drivers around you are expecting you to be paying attention to what they're doing, and because, like, you're losing part of your life by just not by being boxed in these ruts. Having the TV on all the time. That was certainly the way I thought of it. My dad just had the TV on all the time, all day, every day. The TV was on. That was back in the days before Fox News, when I was but a wee lad. But whatever was on, it was always on. So, I mean, that was just a rut he was in. And, I understand some of the psychology behind all of that. But again, part of the idea, I think, of what Odin calls to us to do is to turn off the mindlessness and to engage in the world in a way that is full, so that we can, suck the marrow out of the short time that we are here. Driving is an easy example for me because that's something that I pay a lot of attention to. Like, in the way that I used to, I still remember the pattern of the manhole covers in the lane that I drove in to get to work. I get left, get further left, get right, get all the way right, and then I missed all the manhole covers. So that's a way of taking full advantage of being in a mindful situation in what could easily become a rut. Now, years and years ago, when before I figured what little bit of stuff that I've got figured out before, when I was in high school, fine, that's the way to say it. I was coming home. I remember this very clearly. I was coming home. There was we lived on a tiny little street in a tiny little neighborhood, and there was a stop sign there, but I've been coming through that stop sign for 4 or 5 years at that point, and there had never been traffic. I never looked, and I just about ran into my next door neighbor because she had the right of way, and I cut in front of her. Luckily, she was being mindful and was not in a rut on her way home, and she expressed her displeasure, and rightly so. But that's been a lesson that has stuck with me ever since then, because that woke me up from that little daze that I was in of just being in the rut of driving the same old way, driving the same old road, and there's never anybody here, so there's not even any need to look. I think good habits are important, but when it ebbs over into being a rut where it's ossified, where it's just, you've always done it that way and you've just forgotten why you even started doing it that way, it's time to re-examine the way that you're approaching these things. In fact, another example, and I don't know how much you want to know about this backstory, but one of the things that I found on the y'all tube is I found this orthodontist who developed this technique called mewing, and MEWING, mewing. And so one of the things that he emphasizes is that the way that you maintain your jaw structure and your facial muscles and all that sort of stuff through the day is a habit. It is a rut that you can get into, where you can walk around slack-jawed and not with good posture, and those sorts of things deteriorate the quality of your facial muscles. And that's why many people in the modern world are, weak-chinned and, weak facial structure, because they walk around with their mouth hanging open. And once he pointed that out, like, I see it everywhere now. And, so the secret of that is on him, and I can feel it changing the structures of my face and jaw. But the basic idea of it is to stand up straight and keep your mouth shut. And with that, and with the application of some of those videos, it's again, it's changing the rut that I had gotten into of not paying enough attention to my posture. The other example, and was in a related video, was, and I found that I had been doing it, is we slouch. And for a lot of us, slouch because we look at our computer, we look at our phone, and so we're developing a slouch posture that is just sort of the default setting. That's a rut that we've gotten into. It was a rut that I was in. I didn't even really notice it until I watched that one video, and it was like shoulders back, head back, jaw parallel to the floor, and I can feel the muscles in my shoulders shifting, because I'm trying to climb out of the rut that I've been in, and and having sloppy posture. Big band name. But I've had that rut where I've been, more and more leaning into the computer, leaning into the phone. But now, shoulders back, tongue gets roof your mouth, butterfly bite. That's a whole different topic. But that's just a way of getting out of the rut and getting into a better habit.
I've found a couple of really similar things, and like the opposite cues, but I imagine the same body setting. I notice looking down, there's a tendency, not something I've had to really train myself in doing, and it's always a work in progress. I don't know if this is just, I don't know, a relic from high school or whatever else, but making sure you're looking people in the eye and maintaining eye contact. We've gotten really used, especially men, to not making eye contact with people because of various social cues. Making the point of making intentional eye contact with people is really important, and it's something I've had to cue myself on that's really helped in a really similar way. Also with the posture thing, I don't think about correcting a slouch, I think about a lack of standing up with my chest out and my head up. So, I mean, it's the same thing, just from a different direction. But yeah, it's a constant, when I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror or something that cues me on it, a constant like force of, head high, chest up when you're walking. Those subtle things don't seem like a big deal, but when we're surrounded by so many people who unconsciously fall into those ruts, a little bit of intentionality on your end can really set you out from the pack in a very, very positive way. And there's a lot to be said for that. We talk a lot.
It does. And that's even the thing like making your bed, right?
Mhm.
It's you get in the habit of having good habits, and it can build some momentum so that you feel like you're accomplishing something before you leave the house.
Yeah, Mandy's good at that.
Lucky for you.
It's one of those marriage advantages.
Highly
Yeah,
recommended.
she is very intentional, has developed good habits as far as making the bed. Appreciate you. Anyways, so no, but what I was going to say also is there's been a great deal of effort put in social conditioning to make us pretend amongst each other that looks don't matter or are not important or are superficial. They're not. The hammer is a part of our soul. The looks, the visual impression that you make on the world, that is your first impression. That is your first line of defense, and it's your first line of offense, and how you face the world and how you carry yourself, how you project your will and your self-worth through your appearance is hugely important, and it's instinctually important. That's why I use the term pretend. It's not just a casual jab at, the modern left and their nonsense. No, it's something that we're taught that we're both supposed to pretend, but we don't really think. And it's really obvious when you have instinctual responses. Good looking people are awesome. Ugly people are gross. We all know that that's a thing. We can pretend it's not. And, we don't want to tell the uggos that it is because it's mean, but we all know it's a thing. So anything we can do, and I say that, we can all sharpen up how good we look. If you are gorgeous, if you are, the masculine ideal, you can always tweak it. You can always enhance it. You can always make it a little bit better. And for all the rest of us, there's a lot of ways that we can improve. Some of them are really subtle. Some of them take a lot more effort, but all of them are intentional. All of them are the result of willful, intentioned habits and conditioning till that becomes something that you regularly do and that you have purposefully built into your life. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
It's absolutely true. And I don't want to. There are, for example, celebrities who are physically unattractive, just in the way that like you ran into them on the street, you would not think that they're attractive, but just because they're able to present themselves in just having a cheerful disposition, and having a positive disposition is a great way to enhance your attractiveness. There are people who just you make the best of what you have, and you will be attractive, because attractive and beautiful are related terms, but they're not. It's not the same word, and they're two different words for a reason. Because English is such an awful language, it has subtle distinctions for these sorts of things. And so you can get in the habit of presenting. Oh, I know what I was going to talk about. Because another good habit to get into is delayed gratification. Okay, it's not eating dessert until way after the meal, or or not buying yourself the new pair of shoes today, but next week, or not, delaying that sort of thing. There was actually a pub just today, BBC published an article about these guys who were doing experiments with on rats, and what they found was that they treated like one set of rats. They would give them the treat as soon as they walked in the door, like they would give them Fruit Loops. I don't know why that's such a great treat for a rat, but apparently that's cool for them. So, but then other rats, they would make them work for it. They would make them do these chores and accomplish a series of tasks before they got their Fruit Loops. And what they found was that the rats who had delayed gratification had a more optimistic outlook. And I don't know how they measured that exactly, but I trust the science hippies on the way that they've done that, because it makes sense. If you think like all the goodies at the front, and then the rest of the day is just going to be a long downhill slide, that gives you kind of a bleak outlook on life, like the best of it's already over. Whereas if you develop the habit of delayed gratification, then all the good stuff's out there at the end. The good stuff is coming. The better stuff's coming. The best is going to be out here, out here and long. And so that's kind of the glass half empty approach, which I think that example is backwards. You know what I mean? It's optimism as opposed to pessimism, which is just another rut people get into. Man, this stuff sucks.
You know what is a good dose of optimism is the generosity of our listeners. Gilbert just donated 200. Like, okay, so I joked to make a cool transition and to make sure I mention this, but realistically, okay, so I will first thank you, Gilbert, for $200 donation towards the heat at Thorshoff. We really appreciate you. You donate all the time. You're amazing. Thank you so much. And Leroy in Michigan, also a frequent donor on here, donated $50 towards Thorshoff heat. Thank you for that. But a point on that, it was just about the optimism versus pessimism. It's very compelling in the world that we live in to see a lot of stimulus that agitates our senses and makes us, notice all the things to be grumpy about. And there are myriad things to be grumpy about. Don't get me wrong. But all too often, we don't see the really cool things either. There's a lot of stuff externally that doesn't really impact me that people do that's irritating. But we're all sitting together right now and having an awesome evening talking about meaningful things in a spiritual community. And we have people on here who are willing to give, substantially of themselves and their resources to help make this work to the best of its ability. And you guys seriously are a bright spot in the world to a great many of us, including myself. So thank you guys for that. You guys are awesome.
That's a good habit that they're in. They come in like GW Farnsworth, first off the post, kicking in some stuff to make all this stuff happen. Because, and you say it, I say it, but it does. We don't like to beg for money. Money's what we need. Money's how this stuff happens. If we were in a different era, we'd be trying to get you to bring your horse down here and, plow some fields so we can barter for a new wood stove and the thing. But instead, we just need your money. So in the great grand scheme of things, it's actually easier what we're asking.
Indeed.
So another thing that to get to actually to say a couple of things about the ritual part. I do have some rituals that I engage in the mornings, and I think that's an important as we revive folkish spirituality into Midgard. I think the more of us that are doing simple rituals. It doesn't have to be anything um, overly complicated or more than a couple of sentences. Express some gratitude to the gods for bringing forth this existence. Express some gratitude to your uh, grandparents for bringing you into existence. And that will start the day with some optimism, that's the best way to approach it. The best is on the way.
All right. So is that where we are at for right now with your notes for the top of the show?
Yes.
All right. Well, so let's ponder that and talk about it. But we also have some other questions that have stacked that might inspire some commentary and some contextualization. So, okay. And something for you guys to know, seriously. Alan gave kind of a mock email address earlier. If you do have any of your suggestions and your stuff, and importantly, your questions, vns@runestone.org. And many of you, or several of you, take advantage of this regularly. So we appreciate that. That's awesome. And it gives us stuff to discuss on the program. One of the things about you guys' questions is, and I hope this has got a couple of implications. So first, I'd be very happy to answer them for your knowledge and your betterment. Also, if you're asking it, chances are there's other people out there thinking and wondering on the same thing. So sometimes if I answer it, I try to make sure I answer it meaningful to the intent of the person asking, but also sometimes I go a little bit far afield to kind of cover it broadly for people who are wondering about similar things in a similar vein. So I want to make sure I'm answering it for the person who asked, but also for our audience that, is several thousand of you that listen and are, paying attention. I think it helps. For every person that asks questions, there's a number of people that have questions that just don't get them asked. So thank you to those who contribute questions. Hi, all. I appreciate your response on the Academy curriculum question last week. Since it's not an option, and the person who asked the question says they are not eligible for membership, but they were asking about enrolling their child in the Asatru Academy. Since it's not an option, I wonder if there's a good, strictly secular homeschool curriculum option you might recommend. What are your thoughts on public versus private schools? I really don't want my kids in any form of public education, but all private schools near me are tied to some form of Christianity, Catholic, Lutheran, holiness, etc. Would you rather fight the brainwashing of your kids in the former or the latter? Alan, you got thoughts on that up front?
So question. As for the public schools, like 10 years ago, I would have said, well, it depends on your demographics, right? We had a good public school experience that was before the woke stuff was so bad. My youngest is 25. So, it was, there was always a little bit of that stuff around. I think it's been the long march through the institutions is just reaching its peak now, but it was certainly a thing in the, even, that long ago, 20, 50 years ago. So, but at the same time, and that's one of the reasons why zip code is so important. If you're in a good demographic zone, public school can be a decent experience. If you engage with your children, that's which comes back to being in good habits instead of ruts. We never allow we didn't even turn the TV on during the day. But so when we ate dinner as a family every night, we always talked about what the kids had learned at school. What did y'all, what did you do? And it seems like almost verging on a rut, but it's good. Have the kids talk about what they learned, and what kind of spin the teacher was putting on it. What are you reading in English class? Are you reading Chaucer or are you reading garbage? And you can always enhance your children's education by talking to them about what it is that they're learning and the way that the teacher is teaching it. And there's um, and even in public school, you can always enhance school curriculum by getting your kids to read, um, do other stuff. You can do science at home. I mean, there's nothing that says that school is over here and home is over here, that as if it's two totally different parts of the universe. You know, you can teach your kids in an informal way and enhance their education. Now, so if you were in a bad demographic, and and I will say I don't know a lot about the homeschooling curricula. I know that there are many of them out there that are good, but if you have the time for it, which I mean that's uh, to dedicate the time to, and some states allow like a pooled homeschool resource, which would be a good thing to have if you're in one of those states. But if it comes down to a bad public school or a good Christian school, I would opt for the Christian school. Um, of course, the tuition is going to be a challenge, but uh, you know, if you if it's a Christian school that has some hearkening still to traditionalism, because in a certain way of looking at it, certainly the way that I look at it, I think Christianity is responsible as the gateway for a lot of this woke, um, radical egalitarianism. I mean, Christianity is the gateway drug uh, to where we are. Sorry, I just thought of that. That's a cool way to say it, though. But at the same time, if you're if you can find a staunch fundamentalist, traditionalist Christian school, I would take that over a bad public school. Because a bad public school is the worst of all worlds. You're going to have bad teachers, bad demographics, and it's going to be ugly and brutal, and kids not going to learn anything. You can unteach them Christianity. I unlearned it.
Yes. No, I think that first, yeah, we highly recommend Waldorf as far as homeschool curriculums. If you're able to and you're thinking about doing homeschool. Also, there are brick and mortar Waldorf schools that might also be an option for you, depending if you're looking at private schooling. So the details matter. There's quote unquote Christian schools now that are fully woke, and I think you have less of the minority violence that you have in public schools, but you probably have equal risk of sexual predation. There are also, as Alan was talking about, strict traditionalist Christian schools that I think is the best option if your choice is a woke public school or a woke Christian school. Trying to find a traditional Christian school is a much better option, but it depends on where you are. There are many school districts in this country that have wonderful public schools. There are lots of them. They are just greatly outnumbered by school districts that are awful and dangerous. And one of the things that is unfortunate, depending on where you live and the demographic of where you live, is often the public school is dangerous because of the degeneracy taught by the teachers in the curriculum, but also it puts your children at, in a position of being preyed upon by predatory children who are not being raised with any attempt at civility or appropriateness. So it's doubly dangerous in a lot of places. But I mean, you know what the problems are. So the positive, the choice is the one or the other. On balance, if you said at random point in anywhere in the United States, public school or private school that's Christian, I would choose Christian private school. I think the best option is homeschooling them if you're able. As Alan mentioned, there's sometimes cooperatives or groups of parents that share some of that responsibility, or at least share elements of it. Like maybe they do their own thing at home and then they meet up for sports or going to the park or doing other socialization things. So I think there's a lot of that. And certainly that's increased drastically. Two-pronged. It's increased drastically as the parents have realized just how bad public schools have gotten, but also with the response to COVID, having everyone be encouraged to homeschool their children for a couple of years, people realize, hey, this isn't so bad. Hey, they really didn't miss out on a lot of the things and they got some benefits. So I think there's a lot. This is a good time if you want to pursue homeschooling, and there are a lot of resources out there. Nick, if you could look this up for me on who we go through, there's like a homeschool legal defense something that has a lot of resources that are really, really good.
HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Aid.
That is a really good organization with a lot of really good resources. Even if you don't need legal defense, it's got a lot of homeschooling information that you might find really beneficial.
And another thing to say, and I know this is like, then takes one step out beyond that. The frustrating thing about having to have this whole discussion is these are our schools. School in this way is a Western construction. So and I know that we live, on the one hand, we live in this reality where all of our bastions are eroding out from under us. But at some point, we need to start taking these institutions back and, getting in there and being on a school board and going to school board meetings, as boring and frustrating and irritating as all that is. That's the only way that we're going to change this and bring it back.
Yeah. So, okay, a kind of a side note tangent, but something that I think is important. We have a lot of people in different demographics, but we got a lot of angry young men that want to do things that we, I guess, get in a rut of calling political. Wearing a skull mask and like street agitating isn't overtly political. We use political a lot, but very few of the people who share our values or our worldview want to actually be political and be on their local school board or get some sort of political position in their local city, state, county, municipal government doing something to help. If we had more traditionally minded voices involved in those kind of things and putting their voice out there to be heard in those kind of environments, I think that would help a lot. And I get that, yeah, but in the meantime, while you're feeling it out, putting your kid in a dangerous public school is not a good option. I understand that. But certainly there's people who don't have their kids in public school or can wait till they're done or whatever that can still get involved and do those things. Sometimes there's, voices of, hey, going out and, being seen in the street waving a flag or dropping a banner or whatever is not the most productive use of time. I don't ever want to counter signal those guys that are out there doing that are doing it legally and responsibly, sure. But I think all too seldom it's considered actually having people voice their concerns in, the traditional and appropriate sphere to voice them. If people tried that more, I think there would be a lot of good things that would happen. Is it going to change the entire world? Maybe not, but it might very well change, little things in your county. It might very well be the voice that stops, drag queen story hour at your local library.
Perfect example. And that's how you change the world, is one county at a time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jackson County, Tennessee.
There you go. So worthwhile plug for that. It has long been the plan to get myself and my family and a number of other leaders in the Asatru Folk Assembly and members to move to Jackson County, Tennessee, to centralize a presence in a small county to where we have a voice and we have a face in the community, where we can build reputation, and where we can, enact the kind of life that we want to have in a community where we might be able to have a critical mass to where our opinion counts, our voice gets heard. I have tried to subtly nudge for it, but I didn't want to push overly hard until I was there. I certainly don't want to be hypocritical, and I always like to lead from the front when I can. You got about a week and a half before I will be fully qualified to be maximally obnoxious trying to get the rest of you guys out there. So be forewarned and be invited. If you are a member of the Asatru Folk Assembly and you are looking for some place to put down roots and be, that place should be Jackson County, Tennessee. If for some crazy reason it is not, realistically consider one of the cool things about the blessings of growth that we've had with our Hoffs over the past decade. Maybe, I couldn't imagine it, but maybe Jackson County, Tennessee is not your first choice. We've got other places where I would love to see AFA members start stacking the deck in those counties and getting their presence there. We have Odenshoff in Brownsville, California. We have Thorshoff in Linden, North Carolina. We have Baldershoff in Murdoch, Minnesota. Njordshoff in White Springs, Florida. And now Frazehoff in Austintown, Ohio. So a lot of different places to choose from. But the more we have our community closer together in clusters and building enclaves of AFA members, we will really start to see some positive and beautiful things accelerate in those locations.
And I will say, when we're talking about moving there, we don't mean an hour away, half an hour away, the next county over. Move to that county. It may be slow. You may be there for 2.5 years by yourself, like I have. But that's where it's actually important. If we're not in the same town, if we're not in the same county, if we're not in the same neighborhood, it doesn't have that impact. Yeah, sure, you can drive an hour to go see them, but you can't make an impact on that community personally. We can as a group, maybe, if we go hang out there, but you can't personally do it unless you're there.
Yeah, but only so much. So that's a really good point that you make, and it's something that I've had to work really hard trying to corral people. Man, but one county over, there's this really cool thing. But yeah, but we're only an hour and a half for Nashville, and that'd be really cool. Cool. Then drive an hour and a half on the weekend and go check it out. The more we consider it, a couple miles becomes a couple of counties, becomes a state over. And then we're kind of where we're at now, which is awesome that we have the ability to travel and see each other now. But the dream is getting that as close as we can. And if we keep it to the same counties, certainly in, states east of the Mississippi where there's tons of little tiny counties, same county gets you real close. Out west, there's a little bit more.
If you have lots of money or good credit, or both, Get in touch with me. We will do a planned unit development and have interlocking. There's a way to do it. There are models out there that are being exercised that we can implement.
That's an important point, and this is something that, especially when we're looking at a county model, if we put our sights on a county, we use Jackson County, Tennessee, because that's where you guys should be moving to. But just in case you're not, use it as a for instance. In a lot of places, you can have a variety of us can have all of the different things we might want. If you're a person, Jackson County, for example, if you're a person that, wants to live in town, wants to live in a, suburban kind of setting, cool. There's spots for that. There's areas of Jackson County that are literally in the town, the urban sprawl of Cookeville, to where you got all the stuff you need 2 miles away on the other side of the county line, but you're still in Jackson County. You can be in a smaller town environment in Gainesboro. You can have, you can work with Alan on a multi-family, multi-unit, kind of shared space setup. You can get your own land and farm and ranch or whatever you want to do. There's vacant land. There's woods. There's fields. There's river. There's hills. There's lots of stuff all within, a 30 to 45 minute across county. And you can find the stuff you want there. But the importance of being in the county is you're able to run for office in that county if you so choose. You are part of the census of that county when they start running demographics and they say X number, X percent Christian, X percent Jewish. Whoa, what's the Asatru? That's going to start happening if we get people moving there. It'd be nice to see us listed in representation somewhere as, hey, there's a measurable percentage in this county. Let's consider the Asatru vote on something. We haven't heard that in, 1,000 years. That would be really cool. So being part of the tax base, part of the community, part of the stuff to where you qualify as a member of that area, it makes a difference. So it's just a little thing to talk about while we were on it. That's kind of cool. So next question is more of a challenge. Nick from North Carolina has issued a formal challenge to the strong people of Thorshoff. Just as we are gearing up to complete our beautification project, our heating unit has taken a nosedive. We desire nothing more than to show everybody the best of time during Austra, our national event. To that end, I will call on the AFA as a whole. This will require a significant amount, but we are not an insignificant people. For less than $10 a member, this problem disappears and becomes a footnote in the future books of our victories. A gift for a gift. As we do with the gods, so we do with each other. I continue our gift cycle amongst Hoffs with a donation to each Hoff's general fund and to Sigerheim in the amount I am asking of each member. Got to scroll down, sorry. Today, $10. Furthermore, to keep things interesting and in the hopes of bolstering additional support, I take an oath before the AFA as a whole. If we are able to raise the funds necessary in time for our national event, I will give an additional $20 to each Hoff and to Sigerheim. Thank you for that, Nick. And to verify, I'm the one that goes through and looks at those things, as does producer Nick. He, in fact, did that the day that he emailed this challenge in. So well done. You're man of your word. We appreciate you. And who will pick up the challenge? Tyler says, and thank you, Tyler. You are a just about weekly, at least, contributor to questions on our email. That's vns@runestone.org. We appreciate you. Hey there. Question for the show tonight. How do you ensure that you give each god their due in terms of worship, prayer, etc.? I find that when I try to pray at night, which I often do while falling asleep, I tend to want to default to Odin. which may just be a holdover from my monotheist days. Do you have a specific system or rotation that, that you use to ensure that you do not neglect any of the gods? Thanks. Alan, what say you?
Well, to start with, it's I think it's interesting, like when we do greeting of the gods and go through even the 12 that are specifically iterated in the guilt getting. There are a couple, three of those in there that I'm not really sure very much about them. So a couple things. One, and this, as this analogy comes into my head, it sounds a little bit sacrilegious. But I think of the gods as the team, and if you're giving them homage, if you're giving worship to Odin, it's it's to the whole team. So I don't think there's anything inappropriate about that. I know that even in Sumble, when some folks are just not moved to address any god in particular, they hail the gods, the Aesir, the Vanir. It is all of a thing, and there's certainly. And I don't think that like the gods are jealous of each other. I don't think that is a part of our tradition. I don't think Heimdall is sulking at the foot of the bridge because Odin gets more attention than he does. I just don't think that is the way of doing things. When this topic comes up, though, I always like to remind folks that the focus of a lot of our prayer and certainly the focus of a lot of my devotion is toward the ancestors. This is a hierarchy, and so our direct pipeline, our direct lineage to the gods is through the ancestors. I don't. So usually when I think about these sorts of things, I think about my grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents. And sure, I give the gods their due, but they're far removed from the blood and bone where we are right now. So leave a bowl of cream out for the house elves and say a prayer to your grandmother.
So, a couple of things. It is always a good thing to build a relationship with the Landvitir near you. It's certainly always a good and reverent thing to make offerings and interact with your ancestors. But it's also great that you want to make sure that you are honoring all of the gods. And first, I really like your question, and I like where your question comes from. I like the inherent piety in it. And I have had those feelings as well when I started out, and I try to be aware of it to this day. I think Alan does make a good point and something to consider. And I don't think this is, I don't know. This isn't, take it for what it is. The Jewish God claims to be a jealous God. That's his thing, and he is very fussy if he does not get all of the attention all of the time. That's not the nature of our gods. Our gods are noble. So, and this sounds impious, but I don't mean it that way. The very least that we owe our gods is to conceive of them as the very best of people. They are much more than that, but they're at least as good as the very best of people. So yeah, I don't think they're, delighting in causing you misfortune if you forget to mention their name in a litany of gods or something. But again, there is not wanting to mess up out of fear that bad things will happen to you. But the more noble desire is to not want to mess up and be impious or to, show disrespect in some way. And I think that's a really good thing to think of. What I think is your, all right, my suggestion and what I did early on and what I suppose as far as a habit, routine, and ritual that I do, I have a lot of anxiety when I get on the airplane, which may sound odd because I end up flying a lot for AFA stuff. But I make sure on takeoff that I, say a little hail to each of the 12 Aesir and the 14 Ausenur. And I make sure of doing that because those numbers are numbers I can keep track of. And if I forget, then I can do the little count if I missed something to where I know that I don't. But what is instructive on that is the list that's laid out in the Gylfaginning. It's ordered and structured and lists them. It lists, the 12 maidens of Finsaler with Frigg and Freya, and it lists the 12 Aesir that's beneficial for mankind to worship. And so it's got a good list there for you to go by. And I suppose it's not a hope. It's what's going to happen. It's a matter of how good it's going to happen and how thorough it's going to happen or how fast. But one thing that is happening and will happen as we develop Hoffs to our gods who are lesser known than some of the ones that everyone is familiar with, we will start to build a relationship with them and an understanding of them in a different way and in a very organic way through the gift cycle and through tending their temples and worshiping them. And we've already seen that happen, I think, in a really beautiful way with Lord Balder. I think that Balder is often treated as a story element for the backdrop of other gods to do stuff. I think that's how a lot of people in the mundane society have internalized his position in our mythos, instead of treating him as a legitimate individual God with agency, with character, with personality, and with being. Our having a Hoff to him and engaged in regular worship and regular gift exchange with him, we've really seen our people build an appreciation and I think an understanding and a relationship with Balder in a way that wasn't there previously. That's awesome. And I think we're going to see that more and more. I think we see the same thing with Njordur. I think whereas he is often, rather obscure in mainstream society on their familiarity with our beliefs, to those that worship him regularly and that are there at his Hoff regularly, that's a real different situation. And his prominence and his presence in their life increases greatly. So that will get much better when we have Hoffs to Forseti and to Vidar and Vauli and some of the gods that are, I guess, less celebrated in modern times. But yeah, you're wanting to do that is really important. I think as a, make sure you don't miss anybody thing that Alan said. Just, yes, when you hail the team, then, everybody gets a little piece. So it may seem like a simple way of putting it, but I don't think it's wrong. if you don't know or you're unfamiliar or you're whatever, the gods that you specifically do know and want to speak to, mention them by name, and the rest, and hail the rest of the Aesir or hail the Aesir. I think that's certainly a step in the right direction. But Gylfaginning, it lists them. You can memorize them in that order if it helps you, or you can at least know that there's numbers that you're shooting for and see if you miss something. But your question is really well taken, and I think it comes from a very pious place.
Would a Vidar blip be just 15 minutes of silence?
So that might, first, yes, I get the joke. That would be funny. But secondly, on a completely not funny way, that might be a really pious way to do that. The awkwardness of everybody being very, very uncomfortably aware of the silence and intentional about holding the silence and forced to like correct their thoughts that are, going off in different directions during it. I don't think that is a bad Vidar ritual at all. And no, there's lots of ways to do that. If we're doing an Odin bloat, everybody doesn't have to cover up one of their eyes. Like, it doesn't have to work that way. But I think there's something kind of special about that idea. I like that.
And as you mentioned, the Gylfaginning, there's also the Asatru True them all, lists them all on our website straight from there.
We do. We absolutely do that. I appreciate Alan's disapproving head shake at your pronunciation of that. I was doing the exact same thing until I got tired of hearing Alan fuss about it.
Gylfaginning.
No, I did the same thing. And it was also Alan's fussing that got me changing my emphasis.
So the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Perhaps. Well, it's funny because now it's just comes natural, but I did have to intentionally and habitually make a point of doing that. Caleb in PA donated $100 towards Thorshoff's Heat. Thank you, Caleb. We appreciate you. And Bill in Tennessee donated $100 towards Thorshoff Heat. Thank you, Bill. We appreciate it a lot. You guys are amazing. What else do we got? Popping in from a break at work. One thing I've been wondering / curious about lately is the different cultures in the different Hoffs. I've heard it mentioned a few times recently, but not in much detail. Alan, do you have anything to say about the different cultures at the different Hoffs?
Well, since I am immersed in the culture at Njordshof, all I can say is that Njordshof being the best Hoff, we do try to distribute our warmth and southern hospitality to all of those who show up at all events. I think it is just an organic way, of the way that people interact. If you have two different groups of 4 people, you're going to have 2 different cultures. Although, and nothing wrong with that. That's just the way that things are. It just develops that way. I do like, Matt, the analogy that you made. Analogy is the wrong word. I like the observation that you made that as we have opened the worship to the gods, they are more present with us. And I think that we, that we feel that we are more in the presence of the gods now than we were 5 years ago. And I think you are to be congratulated. The AFA is to be congratulated on manifesting this into Midgard for the first time in this openly, for the first time we always use 1,000 years. It's really, if you want to, 1,500 years, you know, we, we in the AFA, the team, all of you guys, and this guy, are making this happen. And thank you to Steve McNally for kicking down the door and allowing us to barrel through it with you. So, what was the question?
Question about Hoff cultures.
Oh, house culture. Yes, that's right. And maybe that is I think it's a phenomenon of the people in the Hoff. They develop the culture. Um, and it is what it is. Minnesota people are different from Florida people. That's okay.
Yeah, well, I guess first, I don't know, two pieces here. Piggybacking on what Alan just brought attention to, and then while our gods, I don't think are, known for their violent jealousy, I do think that it's meaningful when gods that have not been worshipped in a large way by a large percentage of their people in a very long time, when they get worship that was denied them for a long time, I think that that's something that they appreciate and that is meaningful to them in some way. And to whatever degree that we can be a part of that, I think that is a good thing for us to do. I think all the more for gods that, aren't nearly as celebrated or as spoken of, and to which we don't have any actual attestation to them having Hoffs even in our ancestors' period, them having a Hoff in their name devoted to them, I feel is meaningful and is something special to them. So I think that's a really cool thing that we're able to live in a time where that's happening. As far as Hoff cultures, yeah, but it's a fun, quirky, interesting thing. It's not like a big, you're going to commit a faux pas if you do a Njordshof culture thing at Baldershof, they're going to run you out with a pitchfork or something. It's a combination of things. It's a combination of the cultural background of the people in the area, the people who make up the Hoff. It's a combination of the geographic conditions prevalent there. You're going to have Minnesotans doing Minnesota stuff at Baldershof, and that's going to look real different than Carolinians doing something at Thorshof. People are going to talk different. Those things are that way. The food that's going to show up there oftentimes is going to default to, culture specific cuisine. Sometimes that will go back to the old country, but often it'll mean, Southern cuisine at the Southern Hofs. It will mean, traditional Midwest, I don't know, German and Swedish fare. If you're up in Baldershof, it'll mean a variety of things at Odenshof because California is so much more eclectic. But it also takes the shape of kind of the founders and leaders of that particular Hof and the culture that they build in that area. And that is a mixture of all those people and the things that they've pushed for and the shaping of how folks do what, when, and where. And that looks different places. But it's cool. We're all very unified in the AFA way of doing things. But the subtle differences that make that Hof really a home to those people that worship there it's something special to see when you travel to different Hofs. And I don't notice it much because I get to visit these places a lot. and I interact with these people so regularly, it doesn't stand out as much. But when we have members that don't get that experience as often as I do, sometimes they really notice it, and it's a really fun thing for them when they travel to a different HOF.
Though with the underpinning that, that the differences are much less marked than the similarities. I mean, the traditionalism that we can express in any of our HOFs or in any of our moots is just so much more comfortable than the deliberately guarded interactions that you have to have with normies out there, because we are read in on the important issues of the day, and we have a similar approach to it. They're, again, out there at the edge somewhere, there are a little bit differences in the, how animated we get about one topic versus another, but all of that happens within the broad confines of, we are the folk and we are united.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have a lot more in common if you regularly attend Jordshof and you find yourself at Odenshof than, if you go down the street from Jordshof and you're at the grocery store. And that's kind of a special thing.
Although but speaking of which, though, here's a cool story, which I like to share because I like to keep us all encouraged. A couple things. Number one, I tend to be fairly open about my practice and about my attitudes and things in general. I don't know, part of that is because as I near retirement, I don't have to care really what people think anymore to the extent that I ever did. So it's easy for me to be a lot more expressive about some of these ideas. And I don't have to be as guarded at the same time. And I know part of it is the company that I keep, but when I express a lot of these traditionalist ideas to the people that I interact with, they are largely in agreement with us. This is, it's the phenomenon of the emperor's new clothes. The woke tards make a lot of noise and gather a lot of attention because of the media has so much communist influence in it. But people, normal, real people like us, are on the side of tradition. So, being a little bit open with that can be very helpful, because like if you're a little, it's like if you talk to the guy next to you and he's one too, right? Then he's encouraged now because he knows what you know, which is that we're all on the same team. So we ran out of at the food bank last month at Jordshof. We ran out of fill-in sheets, and our copier wasn't working. So I sent John, thank you, John, down to the store to make some copies. I said, "Here's $20. Make us 20 copies of this page because we need this today." Look, he comes back. They would not take his money. They know who we are. They like us. We're doing this food bank. They made those copies for free because we're doing what we're doing.
That's worth noting. We get things like that every place we have HOFs. It's funny because it is insidious. Sometimes it creeps in if the media or whatever is always suggesting that you're the bad guys. At the end of the day, we kind of remind ourselves that's just not true. We're really not. We are good people. We are nice people. We are neighborly, noble, people. And people see that when they meet us. They see that when they experience our presence in a community, when they have any interaction with our Hoffs or our food charity, or just, hey, there's a really cool guy at my store. I think he was part of that Viking church down the road. Cool. That makes a difference. And we build our reputation that way in a very tangible, very traditional way. What is the AFA's stance on SIGIN? That one is unfortunate. So spreading it out, like, she is on the other team. We can respect her in a way, and we do. I respect her loyalty to her husband. I think that loyalty speaks well of her, but that loyalty precisely puts her on the other side of the line of our loyalty. So she's on the other team. Doesn't mean you gotta viciously hate her, but she's on the other team. And I think that is, it's something to think about. It's a really interesting example of loyalty putting you on the, on strange allegiances and strange sides of things sometimes. It's very important to pick who you have your allegiance with, because sometimes it puts you on the wrong side of stuff. But yeah, that's the short answer. As Loki's wife and his very loyal wife, I commend her loyalty, but she is on the other team. We are loyal to the Aesir, and he is the enemy of the Aesir. Did Witten's Fawn do all the murals at every Hoff? Alan, what are your thoughts on Njord's mural? Short answer, yes, Fawn has done the mural at all of our Hoffs, and the plan is for him to continue doing that as long as he is on this side of the veil. Alan, what are your thoughts about Njord's mural? And keep it real.
It's a beautiful piece. I think it does honor to Njord, and gives voice to a lot of what we know of his lore, as he did with all the murals. It fills the space wonderfully. Our particular space is, has a flat and then some walls that come toward the bay, and he filled that with details from Njord's life and mythos, and all the detail in there is wonderful. And he did a great job with that, as he did with all the. I mean, it does a great honor to have that there. It's beautiful.
It really is. I like some of the little just subtle things about it. Like, I like the pelican.
Right.
I like the rando pelican that just came as a flash of inspiration. I think pelican's really cool there. I like it a lot. I like the marlin, the way it's done in the back. I like a lot of things.
Bowl. Yeah, the big bowl with the runic detail.
Yep. I like, his jeweled ring. I like a lot of things about it. So I had somebody who was very concerned that he was dark hued. So something happens when white people are out in the sun. If you're out in the sun infrequently, you get red and you get burned and it hurts. You're out in the sun regularly, you get tanned. That's something that happens. I think that some of our people are a little bit too quick to be concerned that there's like a crypto Negro
1% too much ochre
too much
in the
melanin.
paint.
No, it's solely because he's literally laying on a beach, and the Hoff is in Florida, so he's got a good beach tan coat going.
Had those concerns came from a basement? I hear there's not much sun in basements.
That's true. Basements are often shielded from the sun. The adorners of couches get very little tint in the summertime.
Nor do they find treasure in abundance.
Or ladies. So just putting it out there. Okay. Alan, what are your thoughts on Wotensvolk?
You'd have to remind me who exactly that is. Are we talking about anyone in particular?
So, all right. So this is a worthwhile question because I have heard that there is some other group of people calling themselves that now. No, it's if the person asking the question. Yes, the name brand Wotensvolk is the kindred group with David and Katya Lane and Ron McVan back in the 90s. And so
the question asker does specify Lane.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's a ripoff one just to be aware. I say that. I don't know if there's some official affiliation in some way. There is some other Wotensvolk too. We have a finite amount of different words in our Asatru lexicon that people kind of stick together in different ways. So you do find similarities. I want to be careful in what I say because it's really easy to judge any of these three people by mass reputation than by actual interaction. And I want to be fair. There are things that I like in David Lane's writings. There's a lot of things that I don't like. I think some of the choices that he made set us back in a lot of ways because of his public faith, and then his criminal activities hurt us in a lot of ways. I have not heard positive things about Katya. I've never met her, so I don't want to defame her unduly. I've only heard bad things about her, so that's kind of the impression that I have, but I recognize that that's not entirely fair. Really like Ron McVan, though. I've gotten to speak with him. Ron's a really cool guy, and one of the neat things about him, like he certainly has, is very open about his views on big meta issues and on political things and other things, and never shied away from that. But though he wrote things, I think he's much more of an artist than a writer. And I think his writing was art. His writing almost, this is nuanced, and I don't mean anything negative by any of this, so I hope nobody takes it that way. I don't think it's as informational as it is almost meta-poetic in the way it's put together and the way it's presented. It's more to inspire than to be like a academic treatise on something. And it is very inspirational. It inspired a great many of us. His art, I think some of it is really cool. Some of it's not quite my aesthetic, but it's very distinct. And I think you can recognize a mile away when you see a McVan piece. And I think he's the first person in modern Asatru that you can really say that about. Like, this is a definitive look of art from one of our people doing something. And yeah, his art, his poetry. He also is a musician, and he, sings and plays guitar. And the ritual stuff that I've seen him do is, again, I think, an extension of his artist soul that he presents when he does stuff. One of the other things, I've always thought the like Viking armor chainmail thing is kind of silly. He's the one person that I've seen it on, as far as Asatru practitioners, that it's not silly. You see a lot of like, you see a lot of fatties and a lot of weaklings out there that can't lift the shield that they're carrying, whatever else. You'll see Ron, and he's yoked and he's got muscles rippling in his chainmail, and like, okay, I'll buy that. That's fair. He's one of the only people that I've seen look cool in the Renaissance fair garb. Yeah, I think really highly of Ron. I never have spoken to, met, interacted with David Urkachis, so I can't. Again, I don't want to just beat up on him or whatever. A lot of what I know is, reputation, or people who have known them saying stuff about them. I've known people that really liked David Lane in real life. Again, some of the things that I've read, I enjoy. Some of the things less so. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I think what they were trying to build at Wotensvolk was cool in a lot of ways, but very short-lived. Alan, do you have any additional thoughts on them?
I think that sums it up. Although I agree with you that in the final analysis, it was kind of a misstep. But I think even, by exploring that avenue of, and probing what was a very, let's say, dynamic approach to, to the reestablishment of our faith. There's no bad way to do it. I don't think. It's two steps forward, one step back. I admire them for being out there on the forefront of these issues. And I've never met Ron, although I know he's kind of around. I would relish the opportunity to talk with him about these things. I hope I get the chance to have that discussion with him one day, but I have not.
Yeah, if you look, and I'm not sure now if we have it on our channel or not. If not, I can try to find it. There was our founder, Steve McNallen, did a interview chat thing on a short-lived program that he had a while back with Ron, where the two of them talked a little bit, and that was neat to see. Again, I've spoken to Ron on the phone. I've invited him. I'd love for him to come out to something, but at a time in his life where, health and other factors just weren't conducive to him being able to make it out to some different events we've wanted to have him at. But yeah, I would love to meet Ron someday. So, Alan, do you have any additional words of wisdom on habits, on routines, on ruts, or on rituals?
No, get out of the rut, be mindful of the way that you do things, develop good habits, including, but not limited to, the habit of deferred gratification. I would strongly recommend, and I don't like showing off a lot of my personal religious stuff, but have an altar at which you do a ritual. There's no wrong way to do it. Put a picture of your grandmother on there, and remember her, chicken and stuffing or whatever it was that she used to make that you liked. um, and through her, her grandmother and her grandfather, and these, and I'm always on the. Well, I have a ritual that I do, but but it is a ritual of remembrance, and to remind us of our place in the folksfold. We are the current face of our people. Um, we borrow that from our grandchildren, and we inherit it from our grandparents, and we need to just remember that in word and work.
Yeah, I think to hearken back to the very beginning of our conversation, thing about driving. A thing about driving that, you'd mentioned the person you spoke to that, it's just time for me to zone out. That is scary and dangerous to hear. But it's funny because, in a way, driving is like a meditation, but for all the wrong reasons. Like, people are able to get stuck to where they bifurcate, they go into a period of automated actions, and they're completely not present. But it's not done in a ritual context. It's not done towards any enlightenment. It's just done because they completely devolve into NPC mode.
Yep.
And it's impressive that people fall asleep and wake up in their driveway and don't know how they got there. It's amazing that that can happen, and not with like the Teslas with the auto drive, but like 20 years ago with none of that stuff. It's really,
Somehow the car knew its way home.
yeah. And that's scary, but it is honest. That's a thing. And we have, it is, we find this with a lot of different people. I notice that this sometimes happens with older people. There's a point where either people never start trying and never wake up, or where people give up and revert. But there's a large percentage of our kinfolk out there in the world that don't live intentionally, that don't think critically, that aren't actively engaged in their life. And it's absolutely the NPC phenomenon, but when we say that enough, we forget what it really means. Life is much easier if you just don't notice what's going on and you just stay, medicated and happy in whatever, eat whatever food you can find, and, look at nudie pictures on your phone, and like just stay in whatever video game place and just don't participate in life. It's easier that way. It's much more challenging to live intentionally and to go out and talk to a girl and meet them in real life and actually try to date them and maybe build a family with them. That's much more challenging. It's much more challenging to go and do something or accomplish something than it is to play a video game about accomplishing something. Life is much easier if you just play The Sims on your computer instead of go out and like do any of those things in the real world. And all of us have occasion to fall into and be lulled into some of that. And sometimes and I'll say this, sometimes it's very fun to just escape into some nonsense that's just kind of a palate cleanser. And if you're doing that to cleanse your palate, you're doing it on purpose to like, cool, I need a break, I'm just going to go watch something dumb and relax. That's great. And that's healthy. There's a lot of people that's their default existence. They don't know there's anything else. And things are engineered to where that's the way it is. And we get really into these trendy ways of describing it, to, bread and circuses.
Scrolling.
Doom scrolling is a version, it's a strange and malignant version of that. It's like that way you feel
Hey,
like
hey, that's mine. That's mine.
and you feel like you're awake and you're aware of all the stuff. So like, no, I'm not an NPC. I know what's up. But it's the same kind of thing. If you're just sitting there and your interaction with it is just scrolling on your phone through all the negative stuff.
Right.
Being intentional. And the other thing that I want to stress too on it, it looks real different for different people. You don't have to do yoga. You don't have to, there's not one right way to do it, but the intentionality is what makes the difference. If you're doing what you're doing on purpose and with a mission and with an engagement, that's better than floating. And if you're just floating aimlessly, put your head up every now and again and see what's going on. I don't get a lot out of a lot of philosophers. There's some that I do, but one that I do a lot that I really enjoy his stuff is Julius Evola, and he talks a lot about that. There's a big difference in the quality of the soul of all of the people that just kind of graze like cattle throughout their lives versus people that wake up and have a degree of aristos about them to where they're actively engaged in the spiritual current of the world around them in a meaningful way. And there's a lot to be said for that. Alan, what do you think of Guido von List?
That's an interesting question, and one that I have given a little bit of thought to. What room practice I have is exclusively in the elder Futhark. I'd say discount what seems to have been a genuine strike as the God stuff was remanifesting in Midgard. I think it seems to me that Guido von List's experience was very real. That he was touched in some way by the Odinic force. And I mean that's and not having been there, I can't really say more than that. But the struggle then is if you think that was real, then we should be practicing the Armanan Futhark. But I don't think that it was any less real than the prior manifestations. Maybe that's the right way to say it. And I've not read a lot of his work, I regret to say, because I've been reading the interpretations of the Elder Futhark.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said for Meister von List. It's a reason it was really important to me to include him as one of our heroes that we celebrate with the Day of Remembrance. And he is the patron hero of Odenshof. And anybody who doesn't know about that, when he was younger and he was, kind of going through his Odinic awakening about things, he did a ritual where I think he was in, I have to go through where he was when he did the ritual, but he like buried bottles of wine in the shape of a swastika and did oath that one day when he grew up, he was going to erect a temple to Odin. And that was something that he had oath to do and was going to do. And having him as being the Hof hero at Odin's was kind of a posthumous way of fulfilling that oath for him, because it's not something he got to do, in his real adult life. But what he did do was significantly contribute to a current that was just waking up in the soul of our folk. So his Armin and Runic revelation is absolutely legitimate. It is the authentic meaning of the runes in Odin's rune song in the Havamal. There's none of them that are innovative. His interpretation of them is, and his selection of which runes apply to which of the stanzas is certainly, his innovation and his development. But they're Elder Futhark runes. The shape, again, I've said many times, the rune isn't the straight line drawing. Yes, I realize that we all, myself included, refer to that as the rune, but it's a symbol that represents the rune. The two lines with the little line that make what we call the letter A, that doesn't make an A sound. It doesn't make any sound at all. It's three straight lines together. We know what it means, so we make the sound. Any of those things, they represent a bigger mystery. But it's an interesting thing that you see with critics of his. No, his runes are just made up garbage. Okay. How come? Well, he was just some guy that had like cataract surgery, and then he all of a sudden came out and said, "Look, guys, I got these runes." Okay. Roll that back in time. What do you think happened when the first guy wrote down the Elder Futhark? Like, at what point in history do you think that the Allfather rode down on his 8-legged horse and handed a guy a bag of carved sticks? Like, when did that happen? No, what probably happened was an old, and I want to say Viking, but not really, an old Germanic tribesman had a vision, had a dream, had a spiritual encounter with the Allfather, where he emerged from a trial, a tribulation, a point of seclusion. Hey guys, Odin just told me about these runes. He probably had other guys in the tribe around the campfire that, no, that's dumb. That's just some made up stuff. We're going to, we prefer our loincloth version. It's silly. If this is real, if our gods are real, if this is real, why couldn't the gods bless, one of our very special people with inspiration in, I don't know, 19 whenever. Now I feel bad. I don't know the exact date of his cataract operation. But, 1906, why can't you have an inspiration then? You can only have inspirations in, the Volkswanderung. That's the only time you can have inspiration. You can only have inspiration in it. The logic doesn't play out. When we're stuck only conceiving of our faith in some archaic mist of prehistory, but we can't conceive of the miraculous in our own day and in our own lives, we've really limited our ability to participate in our faith and our ability to fully engage and fully believe in it. I absolutely believe in the inspiration of that the Allfather gave to Meister von List. His pioneering efforts in the study of runes, in the resurrection of proto Asatru, I guess, set currents in motion that brought us to where we are today. No, he didn't have everything right. He had everything much more right than people had up until his time. Absolutely. And he was working with far less comprehensive materials than we have at our fingertips now. But the awakening that he did and the interaction that he had from the Allfather, that's meaningful, and that counts. Counts today. It counts in his lifetime. It's going to count 1,000 years from now. It counts, and it's why we venerate him as one of our heroes. All right, so we got some other questions I will get to here for a second. Does meditation have a place in Asatru? If so, what is best? What is best, detaching the mind or guided meditation? Lastly, what is the 3 cauldron meditation? Alan, answer those questions.
Yes, meditation has a place in Asatru. If you look at the idea, I mean, the broader description of Asatru has, at least in part, derived from a shamanic tradition, you know, which is in itself a form of meditation. The I certainly I've done some Zen meditation with a good friend of mine who is a much more devoted Zen practitioner. But the empty mind stuff, to me, I I think is incorrect. I think it does not express our legacy correctly. Um, I think the Western path is the path of manifestation rather than the path of annihilation. Um, and I know that is a very simple-minded way to summarize the 150 books that I've read on the topic, but that's my own conclusion. Your mileage may vary. The cauldron method, and I will say that that here again there can be interpretations of this. The way I practice it is very much in keeping with. I think it overlaps with the Taoist practice, which also has a 3 cauldron meditation practice. The lower cauldron, which is in the Taoism, is called the Dantian. The lower cauldron is the seat of the physical self. The middle cauldron is the seat of the interactive self, the interpersonal self. It's the heart cauldron. And then the upper cauldron is the seat of the spiritual self. And again, the way I practice it, and I've been pretty open about this, you know, I tie that to the Kundalini practice that I was trained in as well, where the goal of Kundalini is to awaken the Kundalini owned, it's all the same thing, prana, chi, to awaken that energy and manifest it through the lower parts of the self and up into the higher part of the self. So meditation is the habit that I have every day. that's very much the meditation that I do is working the Kundalini, the own, up through the cauldrons, in order to manifest my highest self.
There you go. So does it have a place in Asatru? Sure. It somebody in the chat mentioned this too. It can mean really different things. And I think that we get very, I don't know, we get very conditioned in our head to have a picture of what meditation is. Meditation is a like dangly bearded, half naked, skinny Indian dude in lotus, chanting something to himself. Sure, that is absolutely meditation. But there are a lot of other things that count as that as well. And I think different things work for different people. And I think different things work for different intentions. I think periods of I want to describe it, of intentionally directed thought and intentionality in a ritual environment, in a ritual place, in a place where there's stillness and there's focus of what you're doing. I think, depending upon the person and their prerequisites, has value, can have value certainly for the person. I think it has value for objective reality depending upon the efficacy of the practitioner. As far as which is better, the detaching the mind or guided meditation, in my experience, which is better for me and for things that I've tried to do with meditation, guided, but I've never done a meditation that was really guided by another person, although I've heard a lot of really great experiences with that from other people. I have done like purposeful meditations with an intent or directing energy towards an action or an occurrence or a thing. I have found tremendous benefit in that the few times that I've really put myself towards doing that in a ritual way. So I think there's, a good deal of value to that. Would Ron McMahon be honored if he passed beyond the veil? That's kind of a nebulous question on the specificity of it. Honored by who? So certainly, if Ron were to pass beyond the veil, the AFA would recognize his passing, and he is a person worthy of, celebrating and acknowledging his passing, and, going to his funeral and recognizing him as somebody who's contributed a lot. Absolutely. I certainly think that he is a person in the world that the gods would be familiar with. I think it's one of those things you aspire to when you pass beyond the veil. Like, do the gods acknowledge you as somebody? Do they take note of your passing in some way? And I think the gods would take note of his passing. What's the best way to convince Christian folk to return to our faith? What points should be made to show their misplaced faith in a foreign god? Alan?
When I have that discussion with with our Christian folk, without the part that I emphasize is the overlap in the tradition that we hold. All the things that when they talk about a traditionalist faith, the traditions of Christianity are really the Western traditions, and and again, I try to do it in a way that is not um, confrontational, but a way to co-opt the underlying belief structure, the important stuff that they believe in, family, culture, nation, widely, footnote omitted, but but those sorts of things are the real beliefs that they have with a veneer of Jesus and Moses and Noah on top of it. So you know, and then it becomes contextual. Like the last discussion that I had with one of us who's a Christian. I mean, I just very gently challenged him on some of the history stuff, and because most Christians, like most people, have just never given any thought to what it is that they believe. They believe it out of habit. They believe it because they're in the rut, and the harder, if you take the hard approach, you're just going to offend them and turn them away. But if you emphasize the idea that that we honor our people as our people, and we believe that our own legacy, however you want to say it, mythology is absolutely the right word, although again it has the wrong connotation. Our history, our legacy is worthy of respect and honor. You know, it seems to me that you're not ever going to. And I had to get over this finally myself, get out of this rut. You're not going to win them over in one kind of conversation, right? That's what I always wanted to do. Like, we're going to have this one conversation. I'm going to lead you through the 47 steps, and you're going to come out the other side in an hour. And you're going to be an Asatru. What you have to plant the seed. Here's what we agree on. Okay? Here are all the things that we agree on. Why, and if they ask you why you're not a Christian, well, they have a different worldview that comes out of a different worldview and was imposed in a way that doesn't fit well with us, and that's why Christianity is having a struggle right now in Western civilization. I mean, if 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 the goal is to bring them closer to us and to have them consider that we are a legitimate practice of faith, and maybe to consider joining us one day, the only way to do that, seems to me, is to plant the little seed in there in a gentle and compassionate way, and let them and let that mind virus work on them the same way that the other mind virus has been working on them their whole life.
Yeah, it's not a one size fits all answer. It depends on the Christian in front of you. I think Alan's point is very well taken, that you're not going to have, it is very unlikely that you're going to have the perfect, impactful conversation that, oh, wow, that's a good point. I'd never considered that. Here, hand me that Thor's hammer. I'm going to embrace Asatru. That's a lot. If you can do that, that's very impressive. This is less fun, but it's the slow burn that I think is most likely to actually be effective. When you If they're already not enthused about being a Christian and they're asking you, then sure, you can have a conversation and they're primed to hear what you have to say. If they are somebody who is proudly Christian, then anything that you say that comes as a challenge, they're going to instinctively react to and put up all of their defenses against. I think something that is very effective is building a reputation with them as a good person and as a pious practitioner of your faith. If you can have them be envious of your relationship with the Iseer versus their relationship with Jesus, that cuts through all of the natural defenses that they will throw up to try to fight you, and it will plant a seed to where they, this guy's really proud of himself, and he's proud of who he is, and he's got a nice family, and he's very pious, and he looks nice, and he's successful in life, but he doesn't like Jesus. He's got his own gods, and it's clearly working out really well for him. I thought that wasn't the case. I thought if you didn't have Jesus, and it makes that curiosity, get them to ask you questions and don't compare and contrast like, hey, your faith sucks. My faith's awesome. Have them ask you questions. I've been saying this past couple of times because I've had really good conversations with the Mormon elders that ride their bikes through the park that I take my daughter to. We will have an equal exchange of me genuinely asking them stuff about their church, and they're genuinely asking me stuff about Asatru. And it's really interesting. And they'll come back with like new questions and new stuff they're wondering, and like, hey, so what do you think about this? Well, I was reading this thing. So it plants a seed and it gets them to ask a question, because if they ask the question, then you're not the bad guy. If they say, hey, we do this Jesus thing, but you do this other thing over here, it seems kind of cool. How come you're doing that and not this? Well, since you asked, your thing's kind of lame, and here's why, and this is why I like my thing better. They ask, they open that door so they don't feel like you're attacking them. If you get them to be interested and to ask you questions, the biggest thing is you need to have the courage within yourself to be proud of what you do. When we're hesitant, either because we feel odd or we feel different, or if it's just we don't want to take the effort to explain it because we know that anything we say is going to come with explanation. If they come up to you and like, Adam and Eve did this thing, they know that you know what they're talking about, even if you're not a Christian. If you start talking about asking Imbla to them, asking, what's that? All right, what's it? Well, then what's that? Okay. And it's a long conversation. So sometimes we just don't, but we should. So if you are able to project that you are excited and proud of Asatru, that's contagious. So do that. Whatever you do that. And like I'd say, I don't attack them. Tell them what you do that you're very excited about, and get them to ask you questions, and it puts you in a better position, I think. But I mean, there's any number of right ways or wrong ways, depending upon the audience and situation and whatever that might be. What are your thoughts on the extra runes in the Anglo-Saxon runic Futhark, Alan?
I have not compared and contrasted, so I have no thoughts in that. That's one question I can just say. I have no thoughts on that. I don't know.
So depends on what you're trying to do with them. First, visually, I think they look cool. I like the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. I think it looks cool. Another point that Edra Thorson made in Alu is that if you're trying to write runically, the Anglo-Saxon Futhark is a much better choice than the Elder Futhark. The Elder Futhark works good if you're trying to write Proto-Germanic. If the point of your use of the Futhark is writing script, if it's Proto-Germanic, it's tailor-made to work with the Elder Futhark. If you want to best write Viking, if you want to write in the Old Norse, then the younger Futhark is built to accommodate those particular sounds in that particular way. But if you want to write in Old English, or for that matter, if you want to write in modern English, the thing that's going to fit the phonetics and the sounds the best way you want is the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. So I wonder if the one asking the question is asking about the extra runes to make different noises, or if he is specifically, so something that is a really interesting topic is the quote unquote Grail runes in the Northumbrian version of the Anglo-Saxon Futhark. It has Querth, Calc, Stan, and Gar. Those are really interesting because nobody seems to have any kind of real good understanding on Querth, like the fire screw or the fire all is something that people say with it. I guess I see that ideographically, but Calc meaning chalice or cup, Stan meaning stone, or Gar meaning spear is really, I think it's really interesting when you look at pan-Aryan connectivity between elements of Arthurian legend. And that's something that really occurred to me when I read The Mystery of the Grail by Evola. And it points out some really interesting similarities when you look at the various magical items in the Grail mythos and you compare them to the Celtic gifts of the Tuath de Danann. They've got a lot of very similar items that are gifts from the gods. You see echoes of them in different Greek myths like the cornucopia, but that's kind of a fascinating rabbit trail to go down sometime. But those runes are really interesting because they're not phonetic runes. They're very specific just for like almost like hieroglyphs of very, very specific things. And that I think is really, really interesting. Have you ever read The Religion of the Aryo-Germanic Folk? If so, what do you think of it? Alan, is that one you are familiar with?
It is not. I guess I'll try to add that to my list. I've not even heard of that.
So it has been some time since I read it, and I don't want to overextend my critique of it lacking specificity. But I will say that Von List and his contemporaries had a very not historically accurate understanding of Germanic prehistory. They were products of their day, and I think they did the best that they could with the information available to them. But I think they just got a lot of the facts and a lot of the archaeology wrong. A lot of the work hadn't been done in their time. It's amazing to think of, but people in our, great grandfather's day or our great great grandfather's day, they didn't know that much about, Germanic prehistory. It just wasn't a field where a lot of the archaeology hadn't been discovered. A lot of the availability of the texts that we have today wasn't widely circulated. They got real fanciful about, I don't know, I think Theosophic Blavatsky inspired ancient Erminist versus Wotanist things that appear to be pure fantasy. And I don't know if they're a misplaced memory of something that did exist, but in a different way, or just how that worked. But I think it is fascinating to read about, but it's not something that I can honestly put a lot of stock in. But I think the intention's in the right place. I think those people didn't know the things that they didn't know and were making the best of what they had. It is a really interesting book. I don't know that it is a very useful book. It is not a book that I would, highly recommend. Yeah.
Amazon says I bought it in 2016, so it's in there on the library somewhere. I think I got a lot more out of what's the book that we call it, The Wheel and the Donkey.
Deep Ancestors.
Deep Ancestors. That's if you want to go down the rabbit hole, that's the book.
Deep Ancestors is much better. So I like the author of the Areo-Germanic folk much better than I like the author of Deep Ancestors. But I like
the first chapter and you're fine.
Yeah, I like the book. I like the contents of the book, again, outside of the first chapter. Did you know that the Proto-Indo-European people came from the same place with the same language at the same time and were all related to each other? But they weren't a race, you evil racist, because that's bad.
That's a misinterpretation.
Like, he literally says that in the first chapter, and it doesn't make sense. They're all biologically from the same place, and they share the same blood and the same language and the same culture, but not a race, because that's bad. The rest of it's really good. So, Alan, is there any way that you and I recommend recognizing one's bad habits and then overcoming them?
That's really one of the hardest things to do. And, like I said earlier with the thing about my posture, I mean, it's one of those things that I think the more time that you spend in mindfulness, the more likely you are to capture one of your bad habits. Because I was researching stuff on a totally unrelated topic and came on and I had that realization that my posture was starting to slip. So I think the main thing is just to live none of your life on autopilot. Which that's why I still write checks for my bills instead of having stuff on autopay, because I want to be engaged in all that stuff. Although I do use the cruise control, but I turned off all the other stuff in the car. The lane assist feature and all that junk.
That'll save you some tickets. You like to get a lead foot.
I've got places to be.
I'm sure the officers love to hear that. I'm sure that's convincing.
They do. It's it's the time tax. I spend less time on the road, and occasionally I pay a little bit of extra tax for that privilege. I am okay with that.
There you have it. It's job security for highway patrol.
And Simmons Radar Manufacturing.
So, all right. On this theme of habits, routines, ruts, and rituals, and the general theme of mindfulness, I've mentioned it on here a number of times. I'll mention it again. I completely stole it from Nine Doors of Midgard by Edward Thorson. One of the first foundational parts of that curriculum is to create, I think he calls it a Merkstav and a Leostav list, but it's basically a list of positives about yourself and a list of, well, okay, in the order that I said it, a list of negatives about yourself and a list of positive about yourself. And I found that really useful. If you sit and meditate and you try to be brutally honest implies something negative, but you try to be completely objectively honest with yourself and you make a comprehensive list of things that you recognize that you want to improve on in your life. I think it is very important for your objective functioning and for your mental health to do the exact same on be objective about all of the positive things about yourself. Make this list in 2 columns and revisit it, in a prescribed period of time, maybe every month, maybe every few months, however you work it out in your head, and you will notice a shift in columns. That shift can go either way. But if you're doing things right, you'll notice that you start erasing things off that bad list. And you may even start putting their opposites on the good list. And, you'll also notice when you start slipping and you're like, man, this time last year, I could really say I was really good at this thing. Now, I don't know if I'm being fair. I don't know if I can have it there anymore. And I think those are important check-in points on how you're progressing. I think that has helped me a lot in my life to recognize bad tendencies or things that I've wanted to improve on, or to discover things that I didn't realize were such a big deal. And until I sat there and I got really intentional about my thinking, and I'm like, you know what? I think this really is problematic. So I think that's something that's helped me a lot in my life on it. All right. And then this from a first-time listener who is listening in Twitch. Who are you and what is this? I don't know any of these big words. Help me out. What am I watching? Alan, who are you and what is this?
This is the way of the folk. We are white people doing white man religion in a way that that recognizes the past and gives honor to tradition, but manifests it in the 20th century, the 21st century now. We are practicing an old faith in a new way, and we honor and respect our traditions, our ancestors, our gods, and our way of life. And that's who we are, and what we're doing is trying to bring home, publicize this in the best way that we can, so that other folk through Twitch, or like my air conditioning mechanic who saw my Valk nut on the back of my FJ and asked me about that today. True story. And trying to restore a rightful place for honor and nobility in a world that has all but forgotten those traditional values.
All right. Hello. My name is Matt Flavel. I am the Alsherrier Gothi, or the High Priest of the Asatru Folk Assembly. We were founded in January of 1995. We're in our 32nd year as the Asatru Folk Assembly. We are, you probably will notice the word Asatru means loyal to the Aesir in Old Norse and Modern Icelandic. The Aesir are the gods of white people, known to our Norse ancestors as gods you may be familiar with: Odin, Thor, Freyr, Balder, Freya. These are the gods of our ancestors. As much as they were the gods of our ancestors, they are the gods of us still, and they will be the gods of our descendants. This is a reflection of the original religion of our people before the coming of other religions from different parts of the world, like Christianity from Middle Eastern people. We practice our faith. We have, at present, we have 5 hofs. A hof is a temple or our houses of worship. And we are here doing a show called Victory Never Sleeps, which is meant to present Asatru to interested people and to take questions from the audience on any questions they might have about how we practice our faith or the implication of different things that they deal with in their life as relates to Asatru. Also, each of our shows tends to be focused around a topic or a presenter, a bit of history, or elements of our lore. So that's what you stumbled into. If you find it uplifting and spiritually beneficial, awesome. If you find it entertaining, that's good too. We appreciate that you're here and that you're checking it out.
Thanks for stopping by.
Okay, and the response, I guess, that Nick's throwing in the private chat: sorry, y'all, I thought I stumbled across something gold to troll, but y'all are real, cult or not. You're very real. I still have no idea what y'all represent, but power to y'all. Hey, thank you for that. That's all we ask. Thank you. What do you think of Carl Jung? Alan.
I've read some Jung, to the extent that I think psychology, and I'm certainly consider myself a Jungian. Like if I am correct, my understanding of psychology, the modern psychology begins its division. You're with Freud and Jung, and I'm certainly a Jungian in that sense. I think Jung had some very valid insights into the operation of the Western soul. He is a Austrian, I think, and so he is operating within the paradigm of our own people. So he understands himself and he understands ourselves from that uniquely Western perspective. I know he had some very powerful and profound and positive things to say about Wotan and its presentation to the Germanic soul. So I guess beyond that, I don't have a deep understanding. I listened to a big part of the Red Book, although I don't spend enough time thinking and living in the idea of psychology as versus spirituality to really have a deep understanding of what exactly Jung was trying to get at in some of his ideas. But I think he had some positive and insightful things to say about psychoanalysis. And so to the extent that I give that validity, I'm certainly a Jungian. I repeated that. I apologize.
So it's hard to speak authoritatively on it because Jung was such a voluminous writer that unless you are a psychologist or a psychology student by vocation and you have devoted your life to reading all of his very deep psychological treatises, you go on these snippets of Jung and when he wrote about something that intersects with something you're interested in. Or, I often learn about Jung from other people talking about Jung or from, them relating their experiences in life with him or them synthesizing their thoughts of his work on a different, piece here and there. Matter of fact, I just read a couple of weeks ago a really cool book by Miguel Serrano called A Record of Two Friendships. One of the friendships he talked about there was his correspondence and visits with Jung in the 1950s. And it was really interesting. I mean, he's certainly a fascinating guy and a guy that I really would have liked to have met or to sit down and have a conversation with. I think as relates to us, he existed at a time where you could talk about race that involved white people without having to be ashamed or having to qualify a bunch of self-deprecation. You could acknowledge that different races of people have very different characters and very different psychological elements that move them and that animate them and work through them. And one of the things that he talked a lot about that is clearly foundational to folkishness and to our founders' work, metagenetics, is the idea of the collective unconscious, the collective subconscious, the folk soul. And he talked about that in a number of different permutations, but the idea that there were these inherent forces within the soul and the nature of a people that animate them towards certain things. I don't like that he approaches divinity in atheistic language about archetypes and about thought forms and like patterns that you can give a God's name to talk about that. I think that comes a step beyond a non-recognition, but it goes through an academic's lens of atheism that I dislike. But from my understanding, as he moved further and further through his life, he certainly became more mystically inclined. I don't think he was ever religious, but he became much more open to things that at the time would be considered mysticism. And he recognized the very distinct contrast between Eastern people and Europeans, between specifically, but Orientals as well, but specifically like Indians. And he was fascinated by India and Indian spirituality, but he really recognized the difference between white people and other groups of people and how we relate to intellectual ideas, to pursuits of power, to more base pursuits, how those things factored in. And his work was really pioneering in the subconscious. And I think that's really important. And I think he was a really important counterbalance to Freudian everything's about perversion analysis. So I like Jung at a distance, but I can't claim to fully have been able to digest exactly where Jung is on a lot of deep points. And I also think he was somebody that evolved over the course of his life in his orientation to a lot of those points, certainly in his orientation to the afterlife and to more mystical concepts. But again, I would have loved to have met him. I think he's a fascinating man, and I like learning new things about him. All right. Well, that is the questions that we have tonight. Is there any parting thoughts you would like to leave with the audience with?
No, I mean, I think we've covered it all. You know, be nice to people, have good habits, drive like you mean it. And if you're coming slow, get in the right lane. Or beard.
There you have it. Yeah, folks, life is short. Live intentionally. Make good use of the time that you have towards purposes, legacy, destiny, things that you'll be proud of. Make yourself the best version of yourself you can be. Move towards that. Wherever you're at, you can always make yourself better, and we should always be making ourselves better. And where you're able, help those around you to be better as well. All right. Well, I will see y'all next week. Svan will be back on to talk about the Gylfaginning. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys then. Till then, hail the Aesir, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.
Victory never sleeps.